Up until 1833, the mail package service from Falmouth, England, terminated at Halifax, Canada. In order to continue this service onward to Bermuda, Samuel Cunard was awarded a contract by the British Admiralty to provide a monthly mail service between Halifax and Bermuda. The Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Bermuda Royal Mail Steam Packet Company was established in 1848, and 4 small screw-driven steamers were ordered for the mail service between Halifax and Bermuda. These would include the Osprey, the Falcon, the Kestrel, and the Merlin. These ships would end up becoming the first screw-powered steamers Samuel Cunard would ever operate. Later in November of 1850, Cunard introduced a further steamship service from New York to St. Thomas, which called at Bermuda en route. The wooden screw steamship Merlin was placed on this service to serve the New York, Bermuda, St. Thomas mail service. The Kestrel wrecked in July of 1849, and the Falcon would wreck in May of 1851, leaving only the Osprey and the Merlin, as well as another small steamship, the Levantine, left in service on this route. In 1852, Cunard had introduced the first iron steamer to serve on this route, the Petrel, which would serve as a replacement for the Merlin. However, the performance of the Petrel would ultimately prove to be unsatisfactory for Cunard. The Curlew had been laid down at William Denny and Brothers Shipyard in Dumbarton, Scotland, on the 26th of April, 1853. The Curlew, along with their sister ship, the Ward Jackson, which was originally laid down as the Plover, both started construction as a private venture by Denny's. The Curlew was iron-hulled, 3-masted, barkentine rigged, and poop deck fitted. Curlew was 182 feet, or 55.5 meters in length, had a 22-foot, or 6.7 meter beam, and displaced 528 gross tons. Her engines were 2-cylinder gears of 100 horsepower. Denny's had actually offered the Curlew to Cunard on the 19th of July, 1853, and was purchased on the stocks the very next day by Cunard on the 20th of July, 1853, for £10,587, which was paid in 3 installments. The Curlew was planned to serve alongside the Petrel, the Osprey, and the Merlin. After the Petrel was destroyed by a fire in January of 1854, Curlew would be her replacement. The Curlew was registered in the names of Samuel Cunard, William Cunard, H. Boggs, and Captain Sampson, who had previously served as captain on the Osprey and the Petrel, and would now become the Curlew's first commander. The Curlew was launched on the 14th of September, 1853, arriving in Halifax for the first time on the 24th of November, 1853. Just 3 days later, Curlew proceeded to New York for her maiden voyage to Bermuda and St. Thomas. She finally departed New York on the 7th of December, 1853, calling at Bermuda on the 11th and 12th of December, and at St. Thomas from the 16th to 19th of December. On her return trip, the Curlew arrived at Bermuda on the 24th of December, and at New York on the 31st of December. As she entered New York Harbor in a snowstorm, the Curlew collided with another vessel and sustained enough damage to delay her January 1854 sailing. She was, however, able to depart on the 7th of February, 1854, and the Curlew completed 5 more trips on this run into the winter and spring of 1854. During another one of her voyages on this route, the Curlew struck a shoal on her way back to New York, shortly after the pilot had boarded the ship out to sea. The Curlew was severely damaged, and the crew had trouble keeping her afloat, but eventually managed to make their way back to the Cunard Wharf, where Curlew could be repaired. In June and July of 1854, Cunard consolidated the Halifax, Bermuda, and the New York, Bermuda, St. Thomas branch lines into a Halifax, Bermuda, St. Thomas route, sailing every 4 weeks. This had been done as the New York route had not proven to be too profitable. The Curlew left Halifax for the first time on this new route on the 6th of July, 1854, and provided regular service except for 1 round trip in February and March of 1855, when she was withdrawn for painting, and was replaced by the schooner Alice Rogers. In December of 1855, the Curlew was damaged in a storm while en route to Bermuda. After temporary repairs at H.M. Dockyard, she was still considered unfit to proceed to St. Thomas and returned to Halifax for permanent repairs there, while the Osprey replaced the Curlew for the next round trip. Samuel Cunard was disappointed in the quality of the hotel accommodation that was available in Bermuda at the time, wanting only the best for his passengers. Consequently, he threatened to withdraw his ships from calling there, and in response, Bermuda's first luxury hotel, the Hamilton Hotel, was built. The Bermuda service ran successfully over the next 2 years, during which time Curlew was also chartered by the British government as a Crimean War transport during the years from 1855 to 1856. During another one of her voyages, the Curlew encountered 3 severe gales of wind, causing the bolt which connected the propeller to the shaft to break, rendering the engines useless. The Curlew had to proceed under sail to reach her destination. After this incident, the ship was refitted. The house over the engine and fireplace was raised to shelter them from inclement weather and seas. Later, the Curlew would be detained in port to have her forecabins fitted up. The Curlew left Halifax at 9 a.m. on Friday, the 14th of March, 1856, for what would become her final voyage to Bermuda, carrying 3 cabin passengers. The Curlew was now under the command of Captain Hunter, who was quite familiar with the ship and the route. For the first 2 days, the crew had a fine run, with moderate wind and sea. On Sunday morning, the vessel ran into rough seas, causing Captain Hunter to remain up all night in command of the vessel. He retired exhausted to his cabin to get some much-needed sleep. The weather was fine on Monday, and by night the Curlew was expected to arrive in Bermuda by 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. Captain Hunter was expecting to see light coming from the North Rock Lighthouse by 1 a.m. and retired to his cabin at about 10 p.m. However, unbeknownst to him, the ship was off course, and at about 4 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday, the 18th of March, 1856, the Curlew struck the reefs east of North Rock. Captain Hunter was awakened to find that the Curlew had gone aground on the northern reefs of Bermuda, and his cabin was filling with water. In the ship's cabin under the poop deck, cabin passenger J.B. Howes was awakened by his wife to discover the Curlew had grounded. Mr. Howes wasn't too concerned at first until he went out on deck to investigate, only to discover the sea was breaking on the deck amidships. Mr. Howes returned to his stateroom to tell his wife and the other cabin passenger, Dr. Dickley, to hurry up on deck as the Curlew was sinking very quickly and the cabin would surely flood soon. While he was talking, the Curlew's first mate rushed through the saloon to the captain's room, who shrieked at Captain Hunter that the vessel had struck the rocks. "Captain Hunter, the vessel has struck on the rocks." The captain replied, "Eh? What?" The mate said again, "She is sinking, she is filling, the engine room is full of water." Hunter rushed out, exclaiming, "Good God, what sort of a lookout have you kept? What have you been doing? Where is she?" And they both rushed out on deck, to which all 3 cabin passengers proceeded to follow them. The Curlew was soon to be doomed, as her cabin and engine room were both quickly filling with seawater. There were problems launching the lifeboats, and 2 were severely damaged and smashed in the process. A 3rd drifted away empty. Eventually, a 4th boat was launched successfully, which carried some of the survivors ashore. The crew of this boat rowed ashore to get help, while the officers, remaining crew, and passengers stayed on board. 2 naval vessels were swiftly dispatched from the naval yard of Ireland Island to provide assistance to the crew of the Curlew. By the time they arrived, the Curlew had long since settled down on the reef, with the forecastle being the only part of the ship not yet submerged. The Curlew had also broken into 2 amidships around the engine room, and the aft part of the ship had gone down deep into the water. The remaining men who stayed on board had to resort to climbing into the rigging for their safety. The 3 passengers and the crew were rescued, but the 10 head of cattle on board in the Curlew's hold drowned. 7 of the 9 mail bags, which had floated free, were recovered. 2 mail bags, one containing newspapers, and the other North American letters, were lost. The New York Times reported on the loss of the Curlew on the 31st of March in 1856, at which time they believed that all the mail had been lost. We learned by the arrival of the bark Messenger Bird at Provincetown that the Cunard steamer Curlew from Halifax to Bermuda ran ashore on the North Breaker, off Bermuda, at 4 o'clock on the morning of the 18th, and sank in 3 minutes. The mails were lost, but the crew were saved. She lies with decks underwater and is broken in 2. Assistance had been sent to her, but the sea ran so high they could not save anything. The residents of Bermuda were sympathetic to Captain Hunter and the loss of his ship. The Bermudans not only deplored the disaster, but were worried over Captain Hunter's future and wrote their best testimonial on his behalf. The mayor presented Captain Hunter with an address. The unfortunate loss of the Royal Mail steam packet Curlew under your command on the coast of these islands on the morning of the 18th, and the distress of wind in consequence it has caused you, have very naturally called forth the sympathy of the inhabitants of this town on your behalf. Assured as we are that the disaster was purely the result of accident, your abilities as a navigator having been fully established from the circumstance of your commanding, at different periods, one or other of the mail steamers on this station for upwards of 80 voyages. The Merlin was rerouted to bring the Halifax mail in the meantime, and would serve as a temporary replacement for the Curlew until the Delta, a steamship which had been running from Liverpool to Havre, was transferred to replace the Merlin for this mail service in November of 1856. She and the Merlin now became the supply ships from Halifax, and the Merlin would continue the service until 1860. The Delta, whose commander was now Captain Hunter, would continue the service until 1872. In the end, the Merlin would be lost in October of 1882, and the Delta would wreck in September of 1899. In 1880, Kingston, Jamaica replaced St. Thomas as the southern end of the route, with calls made subsequently at the Turks Islands. In July of 1886, the Cunard-Halifax Bermuda West Indies mail contract was cancelled and subsequently awarded to another Halifax firm. The Curlew was declared a constructive total loss and was left to the elements. The Curlew lies on the north edge of the reef, about 1 mile east of North Rock. The wreck was first discovered in 1955 by the renowned marine explorer, diver, and treasure hunter Teddy Tucker, who had located over 100 shipwrecks in Bermuda, including the treasure ship San Pedro. Tucker originally located and identified scattered wreckage in 35 feet, or 10.7 meters of water. He salvaged some of the Curlew's brass fittings and recovered various artifacts. Not much remains of the Curlew today, which has been steadily pounded by Atlantic breakers for over 150 years. However, there are still enough small sections of the hull and deck plating. There are some parts of the wreck which stand a little over 3 feet, or 1 meter proud of the coral seabed, but it is difficult to identify the original purpose with any degree of certainty. The Curlew's pistons sit between 2 small boilers, and the rest of her wreckage is strewn about or growing into the hard reef, now covered in hard or soft corals.